Today we are going to talk about the oldest literature that has ever appeared on the channel through this Friday Reads, the oldest literature that has ever appeared in anywhere, at least so far as we can tell. We will have a poem from Ted Hughes that has either appeared on the channel already or will appear on the channel shortly after this video. I can't remember exactly where I have that scheduled. We will have entries from the Daily Stoic, an entry from the Daily Laws, and something very special to me. We will end this video with the questions and comments section. The return of MISA. Misanthropist Bookworm is back. A longtime friend of the channel, has been gone for a while from the internet scene and returns in order to comment on some videos and ask some questions. If you have comments or questions you want to see me answer, leave them in the comment section below, and I will probably be able to get to those in a future Friday Reads. Next week, we have a few more questions from MISA. She was so kind as to leave 6 or so. So, we are starting with the BBC. This is the first BBC to ever appear on the channel. Londoner solves 20,000-year Ice Age drawings mystery. A London furniture conservator has been credited with a crucial discovery that has helped understand why Ice Age hunter-gatherers drew cave paintings. Ben Bacon analyzed 20,000-year-old markings on the drawings, concluding they could refer to a lunar calendar. It is a winter wonderland in Kansas City right now, and those are sirens, probably because someone has skidded into a McDonald's. It led to a specialist team proving early Europeans made notes about the timing of animals' reproductive cycles. Mr. Bacon said it was surreal to work out for the first time what hunter-gatherers were saying. So here's the thing. Maybe I should save this commentary for the end of the article. This is excruciatingly exciting. This is evidence of writing implanted into cave art from 20,000 years ago. Thousands and thousands of years before the first quote-unquote writing that we have, or that we have uncovered, or that we have sort of figured out. So here's the thing with writing. We've had the same hardware for hundreds of thousands of years, they think. It's the software that we're running that has made differences. The hardware being the same, that previous versions of hardware, the brain, right, could have understood the things that we know today. It is seemingly possible, maybe even likely, that what has happened is that there have always been forms of writing. We just did not recognize them as such. The article continues. Cave paintings of animals such as reindeer, fish, and cattle have been found in caves across Europe, but archaeologists have been stumped by the meaning of dots and other marks on the paintings. So Mr. Bacon decided he would try to decode them. Here is one such cave art, and the dots that they have found on them that they could not interpret. He spent numerous hours on the internet and in the British Library consulting pictures of cave paintings and amassed as much data as possible and began looking for repeating patterns. This is something we are left to assume AI will start to recognize in ancient drawings and paintings as well. So this could be a developing story. He spent patterns. In particular, he examined a Y sign on some paintings, which he felt might be a symbol for giving birth because it showed one line growing out from another. With his research advancing, he brought in friends and senior academics. They encouraged him to continue with his investigations, despite Mr. Bacon being effectively a person off the street. Time and again, breakthroughs come from people who know nothing about a particular field. This is actually one of the things that if you get into the academia around intelligence, they have sort of tried to institutionalize. not putting in an institution, but make part of institution. Part of learning, part of growth is forgetting what you know, they think sometimes, because you have built up a reservoir of the rules of your practice, of your discipline, and you are blinded to alternative ways of solving things. He collaborated with a team including 2 professors from Durham University and 1 from University of London. And by working out the birth cycles of similar present-day animals, they have deduced that the number of marks on the cave paintings was a record by lunar month of the animals' mating seasons. Here is another such marking. The team's findings were published in the Cambridge Archaeological Journal. Professor Paul Pettit of Durham University said he was glad he took it seriously when Mr. Bacon contacted him. The results show that Ice Age hunter-gatherers were the first to use a systematic calendar and marks to record information about major ecological events within that calendar. He added, in turn, we're able to show that these people who left a legacy of spectacular art in the caves of Lascaux in France and Altamira in Spain also left a record of early timekeeping that would eventually become commonplace among our species. Mr. Bacon said, our ancestors were a lot more like us than we had previously thought. These people separated from us by many millennia are suddenly a lot closer. One thing that I have postulated, I think even on this channel, maybe it was just on my channel, personal channel, a link to which can be found in the description below, that there were many forms of writing prior to the writing that we recognize. It's possible, however, these types of writing did not withstand the test of time. Perhaps they were, for example, in the sand. You can communicate that way. Doesn't last very long. In the mud, doesn't last very long. Maybe they were in types of quote-unquote ink that would not last for years, right? If they didn't last for years, they didn't last for generations. If they didn't last for generations, we would have no record of them today. Shortly after the Ice Age, we start to get all of these different types of writing pop up in different cultures and civilizations around the world. What if whatever they were using to communicate before that just didn't last through the Ice Age? That's all it had to have been. Basically, all we have from these people are fossils. Fossils, not bones, not bodies, fossils. They are long enough ago that their remains had fossilized. So, I don't know, this is incredible that possibly tens of thousands of years ago, there were forms of writing. It is possible, if we can decode this, that we will decode other things, the stories that they told each other, the reason for these mysterious cave paintings. Were they communicating? Were they storytelling? Were they mythos building? What was coming from these people? And can we still access their knowledge and their stories? Just an incredible breakthrough. The next thing I want to talk about on this Friday Reads is a poem, The Thought Fox by Ted Hughes. The first Ted Hughes, I believe, to appear on the channel. I am not big into Ted Hughes, and this poem is kind of a reason why. The Thought Fox reads as such: I imagine this midnight moment's forest, something else is alive. Beside the clock's loneliness, and this blank page where my fingers move, through the window I see no star. Something more near, though, deeper within darkness, is entering the loneliness. A cold, delicate fox. Cold, delicately as the dark snow, a fox's nose touches twig, leaf. 2 eyes serve a movement that now and now again, and now, sets neat prints in the snow, between trees, and warily a lame shadow lags by stump and in hollow, of a body that is cold, that is bold to come. I can't read. Across clearings, an eye, a widening, deepening greenness, brilliantly, concentratedly coming about its own business, till, with a sudden, sharp, hot stink of fox, it enters the dark hole of the head. The window is starless still. The clock ticks. The page is printed. Now, this is a poem that communicates something about perhaps writer's block, about the muse, about finishing one's work, about being pressed by a deadline perhaps. All of this is being communicated through a poem about a fox. A poem that is not completely unlike this cave art. Not completely unlike this cave art, is it? What if these people were communicating something further than the presence of these animals? Something further than their mating cycles? What if these cave art were communicating something deeper, not just more broad, but deeper about the people that drew them? It's possible future generations would find this poem by Ted Hughes, The Thought Fox, and not realize what it was communicating, because it is not communicating this through their filter of reality. Maybe you read this poem, maybe I read this poem previously and did not understand what it was about, and we live in the same context as lived by Ted Hughes. So it's just phenomenal to me. Just phenomenal to me. Now, the first reading here, The Daily Law, January 7th, from Robert Greene. Money and success. You want to talk about filters through which we see the world. Robert Greene in The Daily Law says this: money and success. For many people, the pursuit of money and status can supply them with plenty of motivation and focus. Such types would consider figuring out their calling in life a monumental waste of time and an antiquated notion. But in the long run, this philosophy often yields the most impractical of results. Talking about money and success. We all know the effects of hyper-intention. If we want and need desperately to sleep, we are less likely to fall asleep. If we absolutely must give the best talk possible at some conference, we become hyper-anxious about the result, and the performance suffers. If we desperately need to find an intimate partner or make friends, we are more likely to push them away. If, instead, we relax and focus on other things, we are more likely to fall asleep or give a great talk or charm people. The most pleasurable things in life occur as a result of something not directly intended and expected. When we try to manufacture happy moments, they tend to disappoint us. The same goes for the dogged pursuit of money and success. Many of the most successful, famous, and wealthy individuals do not begin with an obsession with money and status. One prime example would be Steve Jobs, who amassed quite a fortune in his relatively short life. He actually cared very little for material possessions. His singular focus was on creating the best and most original designs. And when he did so, good fortune followed him. Daily Law: concentrate on maintaining a high sense of purpose, and the success will flow to you naturally. This is actually something that I think about a lot. What is your definition of success? What would success mean to you? Your success may look like failure to someone else. The moment you start allowing other people's filter on success to creep into your ideas of what makes life worth living, you muddy the water. You open up yourself to the disappointment that someone else may have in your life, the disappointment that someone else may have in their own life. This is something that communicates to me deeply, because part of what I find my mission to be here is this. is talking about literature. Because literature, to me, is the way that a culture, a civilization, an individual, above all else, is communicating their ideas of the good life. All literature, all poems, all short stories, all novels can be reduced to that, can be taken as some referendum on what someone should do with their life. Maybe you don't agree with very common example, Batman, right? Everybody knows Batman. Fighting crime in the darkness, fighting crime as a symbol. Would that life be for you? It is 100% an accurate interpretation of that type of text to say, I would not want that. Why would someone want to do that with their time? Right? That tells you, so you are not agreeing with that storytelling, and that is because you have taken a critical eye to that storytelling. Something I find very useful, The Daily Laws by Robert Greene, a series on the daily laws on my personal channel. And then January 3rd, from the Daily Stoic, kind of related to all of this, be ruthless to the things that don't matter. Sounds very harsh. We get a quote from Seneca on the brevity of life, from his text on the brevity of life. How many have laid waste to your life when you weren't aware of what you were losing? How much was wasted in pointless grief, foolish joy, greedy desire, and social measurements? How little of your own was left to you? You will realize you are dying before your time. Dying before your time in that you are allowing other interpretations of life to steal your moments. The author, pardon me, Ryan Holiday, continues as such. One of the hardest things to do in life is to say no. To invitations, to requests, to obligations, to the stuff that everyone else is doing. Even harder is saying no to certain time-consuming emotions. Anger, excitement, distraction, obsession, lust. None of these impulses feels like a big deal by itself. But run amok, they become a commitment like anything else. If you're not careful, these are precisely the impositions that will overwhelm and consume your life. Do you ever wonder how you can get some of your own time back? How can you feel less busy? Start by learning the power of no, as in no thank you, and no, I'm not going to get caught up in that, and no, I just can't right now. It may hurt some feelings. It may turn some people off. It may take some hard work, but the more you say no to things in your life that don't matter, the more you can say yes to the things that do. This will let you live and enjoy your life, the life that you want. The life that you want. What life do you want? What meaning do you take in life? What do you want to leave for future generations? I think that these questions should haunt us. That's not something a lot of people say, right? You should be you should be oblivious to anxiety. I think that anxiety can be very helpful. You feel yourself slipping away. You feel your time being eaten. I think you owe it to yourself to understand that. Your life is simply that. Yours. Not anyone else's. What ideas of success do we carry with us? What ideas of destruction do we carry with us? What ideas do we have and harbor about ourselves that we have picked up from others along the way? I think that these things can destroy us in time. These things can make us someone who we are not. And only by waking up to these moments that we are not ourselves. Only by waking up to these moments can we really reclaim our lives. I think that that is something, maybe especially in today's world, with a 24-hour news cycle and with social media that never sleeps. That is something that we should take to heart. And now we get to the questions and comments section, today being the MISA special. So, the first question is as such. I'd love to know more about how do you fit so many reads and so much analysis in your head? It doesn't happen. I just don't. I have to get it out. I'm someone who usually reads one book at a time, focuses on that, and then moves on to the next, usually after writing my thoughts on the finished book, in a Word doc, just to have a reminder for myself and as a way to clear my mind of one book before diving into the next. How do you fit in so many things and not get them all mingled up or confused, but analyze them so well? I'm genuinely curious. I thought that I had formatted this right, but I did not. So, one answer is I kind of have to. I've always been one of these people that is, I can't focus on one thing for too long at a time. And I have to have a lot of things going. Another thing, though, is that I find the serendipity between texts to be utterly infatuating. You will notice something in a text and you will pick up that same through line in another text. Always happens. I try to separate these things. I try to keep them on their own. I try to fully realize a text for what it is. But sometimes that through line can be too good to ignore. I think that it is actually very eye-opening to come across this. I think that it is very eye-opening uh, to notice these things and to realize them, because you realize the way that humans process things. No, here's the thing. Maybe it's me. Maybe the through line is me, and those things aren't actually in the text. I'm just teasing them out because I notice shades of something in a text, and I take it between multiple. But I contend that they are there. I contend that that means they are there, even if they are something that has to be teased out. But it's I often tell this story on the channel because it was a very eye-opening thing for me when I was getting my master's degree. I dedicated myself. I was a monk to writing and literature and reading and all of these things. And I would I had a word count for every day. I would sit in the library, I would do my reading, I would do reading for class, reading outside of class, and I would write usually 500 words every day. Sometimes what that ended up being was just journaling. And just journaling, I would get to the end of a notebook and try to run back through the notebook a little bit, just kind of flip through, see some things, what was going on in this notebook, this 1 month of my time. What did I write about? Were there themes that became prevalent? Were there things that I was ignoring? But anytime it was just journaling, just top of the mind, word dump, I noticed myself going back to things. I would curse myself for wasting time. I would be angry at the way that I had maybe not noticed things in my life, and those thoughts would bubble to the surface and I would jot them down, not realizing that I had complained about the very same things the previous day and the previous week and last month and last notebook. And I think that now for me, what that ended up doing was saying, okay, Adrian, you're wasting so much time focusing on how little you think of yourself, how harshly you talk to yourself, and you're not getting to the business end of things that you have dedicated this time period of your life to figure out. And it opened my mind up, slapped me in the face, and said, hey, focus, pal. Don't worry so much about you. You are here to do other things. I think that literature works in this very same way, in that a lot of texts, you can find the same types of anxieties in them. You can find people who are uh, focusing on the wrong things in life, that are short selling their life. All of these things in different texts, because that is really there. And part of the hardware that we talked about earlier is focused on that, is anxious about that. And we don't realize how recursive it is in our own focus until we take a step back and not think about those words as us. The same thing happens in poetry. The same thing happens in short stories. The same thing happens in novels. So I think that sometimes that really is there and it is useful to see. I think that sometimes only by being cognizant of those things are we able to really focus on other things. So when I read, for example, The Great Gatsby, Nick is the main character, is kind of a wet rag. When I just focus on that text, I can't stand Nick. I can't stand Nick Carraway. He becomes irritating to me. If I have other texts sort of dolloped into that reading, I am more clear-minded to be able to say, okay, well, why is he that way? Is this just F. Scott Fitzgerald, a notoriously anxious type of individual, putting himself in the text? Maybe, but does that character have utility in that text? Is Nick Carraway such a worrisome individual just by happenstance, just because that is the character that F. Scott Fitzgerald put in the novel? Or does that tell us something about the text? I think it does. All of these other people are perhaps not worried enough, or they're just covering over their worry to such a great degree that they must be even more worried than Nick himself. So that's part of it. There's utility in that as well. So I am approaching 2 consecutive years of daily uploads on this channel. I wouldn't be able to do that if I just focused on one text at a time. Now, sometimes it kicks me in the butt because I am not focused enough on one text. Recently, Carrie being a very big example of that. Not a great big book, but it has taken me forever to get through the read-along portion, let alone the review, which I promise is coming. I am trying to reconfigure the way that I do reviews on this channel in general, and I think there's going to be a payoff there. Pardon me. I think that it's actually helpful for me to talk about different texts at the same time. And I think, Misa, I think if you try to instead of, so you say that you basically kind of journal your thoughts, right? You review these texts that you read in a Microsoft Word document or a Word document. I don't remember exactly what you said. A Word doc, yeah, so probably Microsoft. A Word doc at the conclusion of that text. I challenge you to do it with poetry. Read 3 poems and then go back and put your thoughts down on each one individually. Read all 3 and then go back and put your thoughts down about the first poem, the second poem, and then the third poem, and see what strikes you in that as helpful as a reader. Pardon me. I think that this would clear your mind as to whether or not you are capable of doing it. I guarantee you are capable of doing it. You will not get them mingled or confused. A little bit, right? That happens all the time. But it's a process that has proven to be fruitful for me because, like running, you don't go out and run 5 miles. You run maybe a quarter mile if you're getting started. And then maybe you can run another quarter mile after walking a little bit. And then maybe you can run another quarter mile after you walk a little bit, and then another quarter mile. The next day you can probably get a half mile. A couple of weeks later, you're running a mile at a time. Reading is the same way. memory is the same way. All of these things, we have to build up our endurance. We have to build up. You will find yourself creating systems, mental systems. There's an ancient practice known as the method of loci, in which people would, before you had everything available on your phone, right? You would build a house in your mind, literally a house. And you would say, I walk into the house, into the living room. In the living room, I have posted a poem from Shakespeare. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? And you would have that poem memorized. It's helpful for us to compartmentalize things in a visual format. You will create these little systems for yourself as you are doing that. And it actually helps me jump between ideas more than jump between texts. So that's kind of the answer. Hopefully that made any sense. I don't know. In the same vein, knowing more about your general reading habits would be fascinating. Do you ever read just for fun, some stuff that you don't include in the channel, or that you don't analyze, that may even be trashy or just light and fluffy, or you don't like that, or maybe just don't have time for it considering your busy uploading schedule? So right now I don't have time to read a whole lot outside of what I am producing for the channel. Over the last year, so I do a lot of work online. Over the last year, I think I've made something like 871 videos across different channels, different mediums, things like that. I guess medium wouldn't be different, but right now, so my goal for this channel is terminable. My goal is to cover everything. Never going to happen, right? But if I don't cover absolutely everything that I'm reading, it's absolutely never going to happen. And the just for fun stuff, a lot of the just for fun reading that I do is actually research, I'm hyper interested in what is called hauntology. Maybe you've noticed this through my mentions of it in random videos through the past year and a half or so, maybe 2 years. Is from Jacques Derrida. In Spectres of Marx, he talks about hauntology. Basically, this is often summarized as the future is canceled. That we are living in a recurring loop of culture, of civilization, of society, of these ideas. We don't have new fashion. We just recycle things from the past. You look at pictures of people today. I think this went viral on Twitter/X not too long ago, maybe something like that. You look at pictures of people today wearing the clothes that we wear today and 20 years ago, and were it not for the medium of the picture, whether it was printed or whether it is online, you wouldn't notice the difference. That's not true for the 90s versus the 70s. You look at pictures from the 90s, you can recognize those. You look at pictures from the 70s, it's a time capsule to the 70s. You look at pictures from 2000, they look very different from pictures from the 80s. We're in 2025. Pictures from 2005, the people in them, the cars in them, the style, the fashion of the day, not terribly different. It might not be possible for someone who is not versed in today's culture to pick the differences out. Versus when I was a kid, seeing pictures of my mother from the 80s, I knew that wasn't current. That fashion was different. My uncle, for sure. Today, hauntology says that we are kind of at the end of culture. There's no more new ideas. There's no more new literature to be written. There's still literature written. It's just not terribly different from things that have come before. We are echoing the past. We are haunted by the past that has been. That is kind of the reading that I do. I have found AI, ChatGPT in particular, to be extremely fascinating. I will ask ChatGPT, just teach me something. And this is kind of replaced. There was a hole in my soul when I left education, when I left college. And that's because there's no one in my life kind of interested in the things that I'm interested in. No one there to teach me new things about literature, about philosophy, about those types of ideas. It's not in the workplace, right? Very difficult to find those people. Very few people, I think, have an actual group of people around them interested in the same things. Most of the people around us are not there by interest. They are there by proximity, really. And especially when you're kind of a weird cat, that becomes even more evident. And ChatGPT, and probably other AIs, right? Surely other AIs, do that. I can just ask different questions and then discern the answers that I am given. It is Google cultivated the internet to the first page of search. No one goes past the first page of search. These AIs are doing that with depth. It is fascinating to me, these things. Probably I should do this with Grok as well on Twitter/X. People have said that is their main source of AI right now because it is so much better than ChatGPT. ChatGPT, in my opinion, has taken a couple steps back. It had a huge leap forward a couple of months ago, and now it's basically just Google. It tells you, hey, here's this kind of thought about this thing that you asked, but go here for further thoughts. Here's this kind of thought about this thing, go here for further thoughts. That's basically the homepage of Google. So hopefully this is not where AI ends in the ontological way, and everything becomes further looping of the past, right? Hopefully ChatGPT, with the advent of AIs, what we are able to do is move forward, finally. I think part of that, if I am allowed to go into deeper thoughts here, part of the problem of culture just recycling is what science has gotten into as well. All of the low-hanging fruit was picked a long time ago. You want to wear pants? There's only so many ways you can do this, right? You want to make a t-shirt? There's only so many different ways you can make it look. So now we're at the point where we're recycling these things. Science got to the point where it is so difficult because so many previous geniuses have built up this enterprise known as science, that further and further people were able to push the field forward, because you have to understand everything that came before you to make that next leap. Maybe culture is there as well. Maybe something like AI will help us compartmentalize ideas of culture and simplify them to where we are now moving forward. Do I ever read anything trashy? I don't think so, unless it appears on the channel. Maybe you consider AI trashy, the regurgitations of artificial intelligence that are currently steeping my brain. I would like to. There are several plans that I have for the channel. Again, it's all about plans, right? Different songs that I want to do as genuine, maybe farcical, literary interpretations, and videos that I want to make in that way. But that's all I can think about that for now. The last question here. Have you always liked the type of literature you analyze and read here, or did you ever like these things, and they are more of an acquired taste? I think it's all been acquired taste. When I first got to college, so I worked my whole life to go to college. Wanted to go to college, all I ever wanted. Finally afforded myself the opportunity, got out there, and most of it was drivel. And I hated Hemingway. Now, if you've spent any amount of time on the channel, you know, no longer is that the case. I couldn't understand it, didn't know it, didn't realize what was going on in those stories. It was not until I had cultivated the tools necessary to dive into the literature that any of it made any sense to me. So, yeah, when I first went off to college, Emily Dickinson was basically all I read. I was infatuated with comic books. I still think that those are a valuable medium. I think it is interesting the things that we can learn from comic books. I wish there was an easier way of doing videos about reviewing comic books. I would like to do that. But yeah, I think that it's an ever-evolving taste for me. Always just an acquired taste. Recently, one of the things I've been doing on the channel is trying to read different types of poetry. I had noticed that I was going back to the same wells too often. Emily Dickinson, Charles Bukowski. And I realized, hey, that kind of sucks. Not the poetry, but if you were watching this channel, I imagine there is some hope for an expansive experience. And so Ted Hughes pops up. And one thing that I've started doing, because I think that it's useful, is finding syllabi, a syllabus from a college course online. I said, okay, well, let's take a look at this. Why are we looking at these poems? And tried to incorporate more of those poems onto the channel. I think that gives a broader landscape of literature. And hopefully, I don't know if this is true, hopefully I'm doing okay at it. So anyway, those are the 3 questions from MISA. If you have questions or comments that you want me to address in future Friday reads, leave them in the comments section. Thank you, MISA, for this. It is useful to have something to talk about on these videos. And if you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel. So consider hitting the subscribe button, and I hope to have you back for the next one.